So I think what's most striking to me about the prize is that what we have are images made from photographs for the most part, juxtaposed against lyrics. And the images are from the trip of a documentarian, photo documentarian, who went to the South in the summer of 1964 as foment was happening there and here and everywhere, especially here in Mississippi. People were being moved to change their situation. And then we have these lyrics of these protest songs from throughout time, from much earlier in the century to the present. And I thought what was interesting to me about this juxtaposition of lyrics and images is that when you look at the images, for the most part, what is going on is innocuous. You don't see anyone being hit with a baton. You don't see any colored or white drinking water fountains. There's a girl sitting on a rocking chair, people sitting on a bench. There's a field that's been plowed and seeded. Some policemen standing by the corner. The images are pretty quiet and still. But the lyrics, the song lyrics that are next to them are questioning and debating and confrontational. And what it makes me think is that although those images seem placid, everything that's taking place in those drawings is being held, is being fixed in place, is being, if you will, overseen by incredibly strong systems of power. So those are invisible. We don't see those. All we see is the result. We see people being kept in place, being kept from moving, being kept from progress. What's around them, what's outside of the frame, though, is an immense oppressive system. And what it made me think of was the fact that here in Mississippi and in other places throughout the region, every single moment, no matter how innocuous or calm or simple, was actually under pressure, under direct and indirect pressure. So even things that look normal, that look innocent aren't. And I think what those lyrics, the song lyrics next to those images depict is what's going on, is everything that's outside of the frame. And they are literally outside of the frame. They're right next to them outside of the frame, but they're kind of like describing all the stuff, all the lines of force that are actually organizing everything that we see in the image. Why is Fannie Lou Hamer sitting on the bench with these people? Why would she be there as opposed to, enjoying a vacation in Trinidad? Because she can't. She can't because she has to act to save her life and the lives of others. There's this whole question of what are politics? What is politics? Or why are things political? The presence of black people in this part of the world is political. It came about by political means. It was maintained as a political system. So even things that people think aren't political always are, because the lines of force and power extend from those moments throughout the universe. So the pictures that I show in Shooting the Enemy are photographs that I made of my colleagues when I was learning photography at Adelphi University. As I was starting to understand what photography was, I was just taking pictures of people around me. And what happened is that I kept those images, and the people went on to become members of the band Public Enemy. And so those images became significant as historical documents. But the reason I had taken them was, one, to learn, and two, because I believed in documentation. I believed in, and still do very, very much, that the act of saying we are here, we were here, we will be here, is a political statement. I mean, ultimately, civil rights, all these acts and actions of resistance against power are really about the right to stay in place. Like, I'd like not to be erased from the timeline. And so I guess you could say I wasn't thinking in terms of civil rights and politics, but I think any act of documentation, certainly of Black lives, any act to tell the story, to not have our history erased, and the facts of it erased, is a powerful act, especially in the context of white supremacy overlording. And I would also say, it was pointed out to me after one exhibition in Iowa. A professor spoke to me and said, what's also interesting about this is that it's a depiction of, to a great extent, Black young men in college. And so there's an affirmation there also of our right and our access to those hallowed halls, to the right to study and to learn and to be educated. I was there and I proved it because I took these pictures. And so I think, again, it's like really almost anything Black people do has political meaning in the context of oppression, because the purpose of oppression is to keep you from doing what you want to do, to put you at the disposal of other people. And so anytime you self-actuate, there's a political meaning to it. Great question. So I know certainly that the reason I started writing about hip-hop culture was to preserve it. I had this sense that hip-hop was an important thing that was starting, and that if it was not documented, it would disappear. This was the sense that I entered writing with. It wasn't to get free records or to be artists. That wasn't even on my mind at all. It was the idea that I could preserve hip-hop culture by describing it, by talking about it, by writing about it, by talking to artists and interviewing them and keeping the cassettes and doing all those things that one does when one is trying to be careful about one's work. I know for a fact that the civil rights movement, especially in the tumult of the 1960s, was a huge part of what drove many Black journalists into their profession. There are many Black journalists who became journalists because some white editor needed to get that covered up in Tulsa, or that covered over there in Jackson, or this happening in some other place where there was something going on and they needed a Black face or a Black pen or a Black microphone to go in and see what was going on. And so a large number of Black professional journalists became professional journalists, entering the field through the civil rights movement and through its conflict. And so I certainly feel kinship to people who became professionals and maybe the first in their field in some given area because of the fact that there was a job to be done and no one else was doing it. So I think that's kind of like the connection I certainly feel in terms of my work. And again, also, we're talking about the documentation of Black lives. Activity concerned with, which is usually seen as unimportant. And those of us who do work to document Black culture and Black people and the thoughts and the activities of Black people see what we do as not only important, but maybe in many senses fundamental. So the lecture, Shooting the Enemy, consists of about 15 or so images. Not a lot, but what I do is I show them and I talk about them. I talk about my life meeting the people who became the members of PE and my journey through hip hop. The pictures aren't all of PE or its early members or its founding members, I should say. As I move through the culture, often with those guys, I was taking pictures of other people and other artists. And so it's really kind of like a story of coming into and growing up in hip-hop culture, aided by these images of people that I met or got to know better or acquired a deeper appreciation of, courtesy of Chuck D and Hank Shocklee and Flavor Flav and others. So I felt compelled to lecture on this subject after there was an exhibition of my work. Even before I was lecturing on the work, what happened was, of course, Public Enemy became very important artists. And then as they worked their way into history, there were more and more retrospective and historical pieces on them, documentaries and things of that nature. And it turned out that the only person who had been shooting them in their early days was me. So a lot of magazines and documentaries and producers of various kinds were coming to me for these images. And as a result of seeing some of them in a magazine, one of my colleagues, Bill Adler, who was running a gallery at the time called iJammy, asked if he could do a show with my work. And I was moved and very excited, and we did that. And so the work was printed. Some of them, in fact, many or most of the images I'd never seen printed. I just shot them, made contact sheets, and put them carefully in a bag in storage. But we did that. The show was a great success. And certainly for me, I even sold some work. And it gave me a new appreciation of the images that I had made. And I think out of that, I got the sense that I could do this. I could go around and talk about this. It had been a very gratifying thing to see people respond to the images that until that point I'd only seen. You know, I've always loved these stories of incredible works of art that go unrecognized in the lives of their creators and then are discovered later and found to be masterpieces. That's always been a really kind of romantic notion to me. And it doesn't describe my situation at all, but the fact that years after making these images and having never even seen them in print, in Mars's print, you know, for the most part, to see them on a wall and then to have the opportunity to go to various schools and talk about my experience, it's just been extremely rewarding. And so I think that's what keeps me doing it. Oh, that show was called Part of the Permanent Record. The iJammy show was called Part of the Permanent Record. And it was in 2007. It was in 2007 in the summer of that year. And sadly, iJammy, which was dedicated to kind of like, you might say, certainly hip-hop themed work and other kinds of photographic and drawing and I guess you might say sculptural works, closed, as many Chelsea galleries do after some time. And I know that my show was the last photographic show that they had there, so I was really honored to be part of that. They had a good run, and they covered a lot of important artists, and I understand that ultimately Bill Adler work, the work that he put together from various arts was acquired by the Smithsonian's National Museum of African American History and Culture. So a lot of that work that he showed there can now be seen there, including a lot of my own. So when I was taking these images, my goal was really to learn how to use a camera, how to develop film, how to develop prints. So I made a number of prints of some of the images, certainly developed the film myself, that kind of thing. And then I was very careful about making sure my negatives were in polyethylene bags and sleeves, and I had contact sheets for them, and I put them in a 3-ring binder, and I kept them out of, heat or direct light. So I tried to preserve them. I have this preservationist ethos in which I believe. But before the iJammy show, and for most of that time period, they were just negatives in binders. It was really only until Public Enemy had reached a certain status, and people started to start making documentaries about them, or writing about their early history in magazines, that Chuck would tell, the editors or the producers of these pieces, you got to talk to Harry. He has all the pictures. That's what Chuck would say to him. And they would then contact me. And so there were some uses of the work in documentaries for MTV and BBC and various magazines, Mojo and others. Wax Poetics. Wax Poetics was the magazine that Bill Adler saw when he decided he wanted to do a show with me. So I guess you might say there were a few periods. There was the period of me taking pictures, making negatives, making a few prints so I could learn the process, and then storing my negatives. Then there was a period where MTV and the BBC and others started doing these documentaries about Public Enemy. Then there was the period where I had the show, and then after that was a period where I started talking about my work, especially once it was in the National Museum of African American History and Culture. So in terms of the Arts and Civil Rights Initiative in Tougaloo and the Mississippi Museum of Art, what I've come to appreciate is that there's a long tradition of respect and valuing of the arts here. That there's a deep well of cultural appreciation that runs through these institutions and through the people who work here and attend school at Tougaloo. And this is not surprising, but the depth of it has certainly surprised and touched me, that this is a long, ongoing thing. And so I think the opportunity to offer my work in this context as some aspect, if you will, of the struggle for freedom, some aspect of, if you will, defining our lives on our own terms is really how I see it. I think of it as a tremendous compliment that anyone would want to see things that I've made. I'm really deeply touched by that. And then to do so in the tradition, the great tradition of these institutions, and by that tradition, I don't only mean what they've done until this moment, but I mean what is to come, is really just amazing. And it's an appreciation that I have as of this moment, and that I expect is going to deepen. As we speak right now, the program is this evening, but I have a feeling that as this day goes on, and once the program is through, it's only going to deepen that sense that I have of that continuum and my part in it. It's a big state, and I hope to come back to maybe to other schools here in the state of Mississippi and in the area. I can certainly be reached on an ongoing basis, best by Twitter. I'm on Twitter a fair amount, at Harry Allen. That's the easy way to get in touch with me. I'm right there. I write my own tweets. No one else would when you read them, you know no one else would do that. And I know certainly that this is an institution, the Mississippi Museum of Art, that I just think is stunning. I certainly encourage anyone who's in Jackson or near Jackson to make a stop here and to see the diverse and beautiful works that are represented. You know, I think that there are so many misconceptions about Mississippi and Mississippians. And I think sometimes it gets overlooked, you know, when people think about art or art history. And I hope that can continue to be changed and erased, and that people can see that, you know, with the great work that's being done here by experts like Dr. Liddell Hearn and others, that they can see the care that's going into creating a global culture of art reckoning here at the museum, that they can understand that This is a very serious and very thoughtful enterprise run by very far-thinking people. That's what I've come to understand by being here, and I'm looking forward to learning more. Mushroom pizza. Not sure how I feel about roller coasters. Used to love them a lot, but I went to Six Flags and wow, it was scary. I think I don't think there's a reason you go see old people on roller coasters. I think there's actually physiological reasons. What else? The Man in the High Castle is starting up again, and I cannot wait. And what else? Royal Blue. Deep Royal Blue. Not Navy, Royal Blue.
Indigo?
Not indigo. More that. No, that color of the sky right as the sun's gone before it's dark. Right the way the sky looks when the sun's gone down, but it's not dark yet. It's just that deep blue.